All right, everybody, welcome back. Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Hey, I'm Scott Gulbransen. It is time for our post-game show. The Raiders, of course, squeak out of Miami, perfect in the preseason. I know, it's just the preseason. But some very, very good things coming out of this game. Some other things that remain concerned, and I'm going to go off a little bit about that and may anger a few of you. I'm just giving you a warning, but we'll get to that in a minute. Do us a favor, subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening to us on audio, just subscribe, drop a 5-star review. We certainly appreciate that. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, we went live. So subscribe, hit the notification buttons, please, if you would. And also, we are live on Twitch. That's right. So if you're somebody who's a gamer or you like to watch content over on Twitch, you can find us there as well. Just a note, Moe Moton tonight is on special assignment with Bleacher Report, so he will not make it for the show. But the good news, as always, with our post-game show is we bring on our voice of the fan. That, of course, is the host of Raiders Fan Radio, coming live to us from Murf's Fan Cave. It is Murf. Murf, here we go, man. So many great things to talk about. Some really big concerns I have, but let's start off with the good. What's your initial reaction of this entire game that kind of dragged out in the second and third quarter a little bit, but some really good things coming from this Raiders team?
Absolutely. Well, first off, apologize for your audience for having to slum it with me there for the show tonight. And just
That's all right.
But we appreciate everybody joining us. And yeah, man, so here's my takeaway, which is a very metered, level-headed takeaway, like most all of Raider Nation. With a dominant 15-12 performance over the Miami Dolphins in Miami, I'm pretty much thinking that we're the best team in football and likely going to win the Super Bowl.
I love it, man. Well, you know what? But that's how you should feel, right? I mean, listen, I want to start with that good stuff because I do have some big concerns, but we'll get to it. I look at overall, you watched that Raiders second offense for the most part, and we will talk about the offensive line. I can see the comments rolling in on the platforms. People want to talk about the right side of the offensive line. We'll get to it. But overall, I looked at that offense, what they were able to do against really a lot of the Finns' first defense to start out the game there. And Murf, I'll tell you, not only did they execute well and play well in so many points, and we'll get into players in a second, but what I really loved, and I continue to just be impressed with this team, is how hard they play and how disciplined they play. Now, they had a couple penalties tonight that they didn't have over the last couple weeks, but overall, Murf, you just see this team hustling, and it doesn't matter what they're doing, which player it is. They are really flat out just a different team under Josh McDaniels.
Absolutely. It's pretty fun. I have 2 teenage boys and I tell them all the time, your life and your character is not defined by the mistakes you make. It's or the things that happen to you externally. It's about how you respond to those things. That's what defines us. Right. And so the Raiders made mistakes, but then they recovered from them. And so and that's where during this game is although, at times the Miami freaking defense looked like the freaking 72 Miami defense, apparently, because Nick Buoniconti and Manny Fernandez were on the field. But it just they looked so dominant and but then at times though, we recovered and we scored and we punched the button. You and I talked and Mo as well, but last week about one of the things that we noticed about McDaniels is getting fired up at the team, at the offense for not punching the ball in and not scoring on that first drive in scoring a touchdown anyways. And by kicking a field goal in the red zone. Well, what do we do this week? We got better. You know what I mean? And so you see those things and it's encouraging, Scott. And look, and I'm not going to get all up in my feelings and get all crazy about this. And I know there's a lot of things we're going to talk about that are definite weaknesses. And I'm not blind to those nor an apologist for them. But as Raider Nation, you can't not be encouraged by the way that I think what you so greatly just put, the way they're responding, the way they're bouncing back and finishing. Who cares what it looks like on the way? Do you get are you getting 7? Are you getting 3? Are you getting the W instead of the L? That's all that counts.
Absolutely. And the other thing I love about it, and again, Raiders win 15-13 in Miami. Week 2, I know it's their third week, but week 2 of the preseason now is complete. But Murf, I look at the way in which they play, even when they don't execute, when a play doesn't succeed, you can see it. The routes are crisper. The play calling, I love the play calling. That's one thing that we should talk about. I just think that Josh McDaniels, when he came over, people were like, oh, what's he going to do with this offense? And yes, he brought over some of the same philosophy. There's no question. But even in the preseason where they're very guarded, I feel like this offense is just so much more crisply called, timely when they have a third and long or a third and short. It's the kind of play where even as a fan, you sit there and you say, that's what I would have done, because he does it and it seems to work.
Absolutely. If you look at so what we've talked about in this offseason so far is this beautiful adjustment capability for these coaches, right? And it starts with McDaniels, and we've seen it with Graham. We've seen it with, or not, we've seen it. Well, I guess we've seen a little bit, but we really hear it more in terms of like philosophy. But one of the things that's so cool about like what you're saying is that, yeah, if there's a weakness in a place, yeah, if we notice it, I promise you they are too. And I promise you Josh McDaniels is noticing it first before anybody. And we talked about on our show, Raiders Fan Radio, this last week about how that Patriot offense and that Josh McDaniels ran, it was so versatile and so, diversified based on what their matchups were. And so much of it was about getting the ball to a spot. It was like,
yes,
the snap, boom, boom, get the ball out. It's not about like letting your players work open, although we know that Hunter Renfrow and guys are going to do that when Derek extends the pocket and creates time. But for the most part, the offense is going to be boom, boom, ball out. And you think about all the great, and I hate to bring them up, and I know Raiders fans get pissed off at me for this, but like you think about those Patriot offenses and Tom Brady and the way that he plays quarterback and the way that he got the ball to Amendola and Wes Welker and like Gronk and Hernandez and everybody, Troy Brown back in the day, like whatever, pick your guy. That's what that Patriot offense is. That's what Derek Carr is going to do in McDaniel's offense. And guess what? That makes up for a weak offensive line, frankly. And we saw that tonight. At the times, the offense was still struggling. It still allowed for those quick passes, and those guys can make up for it. There was one in particular. It was, oh my gosh, I've got on my notes here, but I believe it was Keelan Cole, and it must have been Stidham, or it was Mullins. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was
Stidham. Okay. Caught him on the right side there. Yep.
Thank you. Yes. I mean,
yes.
and that was all that offensive line. Well, did they look great up to that point? I don't know. It was kind of sketchy, but on that play they executed. And that's what that's all that counts. Al Davis famously said, we're not interested in first downs. We're interested in touchdowns. The end. Like that's what this offense needs to be.
That's what it's about. And that's what they've lacked over the last 3 years in the red zone. That's okay. In the red zone. That's good, man. In the red zone, especially now, I looked at that situation and I saw to your point about the Keelan Cole pass from Stidham. What I love too is we've now seen 3 quarterbacks, including Garbers, who had some trouble tonight, but overall played well with his legs too. He had a nice long run there in the third quarter. And I love how these quarterbacks are operating in that system too, because they're using their legs as well. And you watch it unfold, just like you're saying. And then you get Derek Carr in there and you start to think, wow, when you get your number 1 quarterback in there, this thing's going to be electric, not to mention your number 1 wide receiver, your number 2 wide receiver, your tight end and Darren Waller. And it's like, you can see that, and that running game, which Mo and I talked about on our last show, which is in the Josh McDaniels system. It's about creating mismatches with the defense, right? And you find the weakness and you exploit the heck out of it the entire game. That's what he did in New England. And that's what he's going to do with the Raiders. So you look at that running game, what the Raiders are able to do coming out of the backfield. They use Kenyon Drake a lot tonight. I saw some comments on Britton Brown. Britton Brown, I thought, of course, had a great game. I still think he doesn't make the roster, actually, because that room is so full. I think if they can get him through the process of being on the practice squad and someone not grabbing him, he will stay with the Raiders. But man, you just love the talent evaluation here too, Murf. The fact that some of these guys who won't make the roster just because of the numbers are pretty dang good players. And that is a compliment to not only McDaniels, but of course, Dave Ziegler too.
Absolutely. Isn't it kind of like, not kind of it, I'm not going to hedge it. It really is encouraging that we have players on this team that historically we wouldn't have cut. And if you think, and I know that it got better during Gruden, but like when you think about like the depth of our roster, like once upon a time we were freaking like scrambling, like trying to, think about like, and I'm always like try to let the history like of the Raiders influence my current stat, because I don't want to ever like forget what it was like. And you think about like the days when Reggie McKenzie came in and like all the cuts we had to make because of all the funky contracts that this team had. And we were just like going to the scrap heap for freaking players. And it was like, and so you didn't have barely any depth at all. And now the idea that we have a team that, yeah, you're right. Like there's players that like would have made this Raider team a while ago, but now likely they may not, or make a practice squad or whatever. I mean, you mentioned Britton Brown. I thought that young man played fantastic, especially in late in the game. And you see, so like, you know, the whether it's running backs or the wide receivers, even like we haven't even seen our top guys yet. And that's another thing too that I thought a lot about tonight, was that as fun as it is to watch the Raiders games, and you know, especially coming out like week 1 of the preseason, we were like, yeah, it's great to see the silver and black on the field and all that. When you get into the third and fourth quarter of the third preseason game, it gets to be a little waning. You know what I mean? Like the game's getting a little long, and you're watching players that likely aren't going to be on the team and all that. But then you see these flashes and this commitment that you're talking about, and that's freaking encouraging, man. And and there's going to be players that get cut from our team that get picked up by other people, and that's usually the opposite.
Exactly. And there's no question. I mean, that and fans get attracted to them and attached to them. We're talking about Britton Brown. And again, that crowded running back room. There's so many guys there. Kenyon Drake did well tonight. I think he was, and Mo and I have been lockstep on this. I think he's being showcased for a trade because that room is so full. If they can offload at least some of his salary, I don't think anybody will take all of his salary, but if they can unload some of his salary because they have other needs, which we'll talk about. But to me, you're right. You're right. You have the situation where you have these players, but you're deep enough and you're bringing in such good young talent that you can let these guys go and be okay with it because the other guys you have. And I thought the wide receiver core, you talked about that too. I really believe that we're going to have a rotation of wide receivers, and maybe it'll settle down after week 2 or 3 of the regular season. But the Raiders have done really well with those young guys, DJ Turner, with Cole, all these guys. So to me, that tells you that this team, and again, if you're not already excited about what this team has done off the field to acquire the talent to win on the field, then you're not paying attention.
Absolutely. And you know that, and you mentioned the wide receivers. Like, I mean, it was surprising to me. You and I hadn't talked since the cuts happened. I was surprised to see DeMarcus. There was a time during this offseason, like we were kind of thinking he was going to be our number 2 guy.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, Mac Hollins like rose way up that depth chart. Not only as a red zone threat, which is originally what I was thinking. Okay, he's a big body guy. Derek loves big bodies. You look at all the touchdowns he threw in 2016. All of them were to Jared Cook, Michael Crabtree, and Andre Holmes. Big guys that can go up, high point the football. Like Derek loves that kind of floaty ball in the back of the end zone. He loves that. And so I was thinking, oh, that was the purpose of Mac Hollins. I think that was the reason they drafted Brian Edwards. But now all of a sudden it's looking like Mac Hollins is like, I'm not going to pencil him in. Well, maybe pencil him in. I don't know, a bold prediction, but like Mac Hollins looks up. But so I'm with you though. And like, and we haven't even seen, again, to go back to, we haven't even seen the other guys. And there's so many players we haven't even seen yet. We haven't seen on the defense. Other than, I will throw this out, and I'm going to throw you back a question, Scott, which I thought was interesting tonight. Not only in the defensive secondary was it great to see Jonathan Abram flashing, because we just, like, we're around here in the fan cave. We just at Raiders Fan Radio, we love that guy. He just exudes Raider to us. We're rooting for him. But wasn't it interesting to see Rocky Sin and Anthony Averett starting off this game? Did that jump out at you?
Absolutely, because we talked about it on our Thursday and Friday shows. That, you know, they came off the pup, and we believe they needed to get out there. They needed to get some of those reps. And sure enough, man, when I saw them roll out there at the beginning of the game, I'm like, okay, that's good. That's a good sign. They got out there, and they, you know, at times looked a little rusty. This little step behind from who they are, but that's okay. I mean, that's what it's for, right? That's what these games are for. They're practices. And so for them to get out there, because that defensive backfield, we still don't know. You talked about Abram has played well, and he showed well tonight, had a nice big hard hit, and really played, I thought, a good game. And so you look at that, and you know that they need to do that. They need to see what they have back there, along with the interior of the defense. That's another guy I want to bring up too, Murf, while we're talking about it. Jonathan Hankins, man. He came in like he had not missed any time. Now, I did notice, like me getting out of the shower, he's got some love handles, which he usually didn't have.
Hey, guilty. Guilty.
So, but man, he was blowing it up. That first Dolphins unit was in there to start the game with Tua and all that. He was blowing up the running game, as was Kendall Vickers. And so that defensive front, and unfortunately Jenkins went down. We don't know if how serious his injury. It did not look good. But that's another big question mark. And so at least from the run stopping perspective up front there, to see Vickers, to see Jonathan Hankins do that, another bright spot here tonight.
Absolutely, and that was encouraging, right? And
Yeah.
what about the law firm of Bauer and Bowers, right? So like,
Yes.
you had Bowers going on that was like, and there was, and then and Tango Vailoa,
Yes.
much respect to him chasing down. There was one
He
play
played
where
hard,
I had
man.
to go. Oh my gosh, I was watching. So I don't know how you were able to watch the game, but I watched on NFL Plus, which
Me too.
that was you did okay. So new
Yeah.
experience for me watching NFL Plus. Had on the laptop, shot it up to the big screen. It was actually a pretty cool experience watching the game like that. But you can't rewind in it. At least that I could find. And so I saw 69 out there in coverage, and I was like, was that him making a play, or was that like a design? Like, you don't see big men like that out in coverage. But anyways, but one way or the other, he made the play. He was at the ball, and so I'm with you. And we talked a lot about that again, going back to that Jacksonville game, about kind of like the lack of presence for that interior, and especially in the pass rush. I mean, I know it's Miami and I know it's week 3 of the preseason, but again, continual improvement, right? Which is all you want to see, as you say so frequently and so true and accurately. It's practice. It's friggin' glorified practice. So what's the idea of practice? Get better.
Yeah.
You know?
No doubt about it. And I think that's the other thing too. Even with some of these guys we're talking about defense, obviously Jonathan Hankins is going to be a guy who makes the roster. But I see Jeff chatting on YouTube saying, "Hey, Bolton played well." Absolutely. You talked about Tagovailoa, Amosa. Those guys all played well. But again, just like we were talking on the offense, Murph, you're going to have these guys who play well because they're playing for their careers, right, in their lives in a roster spot. Many of them will not make it, even if they play well. And that's a good thing, though, because everyone else is raising the play. And this is it. This is the accountability you're seeing. They're all holding each other accountable, and it shows you what's happening in that building. There's just a different attitude, and you're seeing it even with these guys who won't make the roster.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I'd love to see that fight in those guys. And you know, let me, and I want to throw this back at you too. So in those plays, especially in that defensive secondary we've talked so much about, when you do see those passes get complete, we saw it happen to Anthony Averett, who's not going to be or is going to be a guy that makes the team.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me like, with my just fan eyes, that a lot of those completions were coming against soft zones. And I don't see the Raiders play. I don't see Graham calling soft. It seemed very vanilla. And I know that's also a theme of the preseason. Yeah. But don't you feel like a lot of those plays that work, it was like, it wasn't necessarily on the players. Like, I'm not saying they were like the coaches were mailing in the play calling or whatever, but like I believe you said at the beginning of the show, like, they're not going to show you everything though either. They're not going to show you everything that they're going to do. They're going to show you flashes of things like playing Abram at the line of scrimmage and things like that. But in terms of like coverages and whatnot, like, it wasn't very complicated. Yeah. So does that make sense? Did you get that?
Totally yeah. And especially when you look at where McDaniels came from, right? I mean, he learned from Belichick. That guy is like General Patton. He's not going to tell you where he's going to be marching. He's going to hold it in. And of course in the preseason, especially with the way the AFC West is going to be, Murph, you can't give anybody any clues, right? So I think you're right. You saw that. You saw a lot of soft zone, and at times I was having flashbacks to the last couple of years, right? And seeing those defenses. But with the talent they have there, I think that you're right. You're going to see, once we hit the regular season, once you hit that Charger game in week 1, boy, it's going to be a whole different story. But let's switch gears a little bit. Well, Murph, do you have anything else from a positive you want to mention before we get to the stuff the Raiders need to work on?
I mean, no. I mean, Jasper Horsted. I mean, shout out Jasper Horsted. Shout out the third-year man out of Princeton. I mean, that's kind of a nice story there. But I mean, obviously, it's going to be, Darren Waller and Foster Moreau are going to be the show at tight end this year. But it's nice to have a player like that. It's nice to have a depth player that at least he's doing the right things in the preseason. And, if unfortunately one of those other guys goes down, then Jasper can come in or, on whatever key situation. So that might be fun. But anyways, so shout out that young man.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right, so let's switch gears now. Everybody in the chat, of course, I keep seeing a name, Leatherwood, something like that. Anyway, but yes, so Alex Leatherwood. And I have to say that, as you know, we have been on our show, and I know you guys have been too, kind of supportive, say, hey, you got to give him time. It's early. Look, yes, he struggled. It hasn't looked good at times, but you just never know when sometimes things are going to click. Alex Leatherwood had another awful game. And do players have a play here and there where they play well? Absolutely. But he was getting beat even when you had the tight end chipping. And so to me, I'm about at that point, Murph, where I just don't think it's going to work. And that's a problem. The rest of the line, to be fair to Alex Leatherwood, the rest of the line, even Lester Cotton, did not play great tonight. He had some good stretches, don't get me wrong. But overall, that offensive line didn't play well, which is what you brought up earlier about how the quarterbacks did such a great job of adjusting to that situation, because you can scheme to work around your offensive line, but it's not optimal. And I think what you saw tonight, if you had a more stout offensive line, even in a preseason game, I think the Raiders win by 2 touchdowns easily, right? Because I just think they're a better team. But in this case, the Alex Leatherwood situation, and I'm going to go on a limb here, and Murph, you can distance yourself from me on this one. You know what? Listen, coaches are coaches, organizations are organizations. The ego's got to go now, and you got to address the offensive line. You got to go get somebody to help. I don't know if they're going to work. I don't know who you're going to go get. But to me, Derek Carr is the Cadillac. He is the guy there who's going to take you where you need to go. If you do not protect him, it's going to turn out bad. And Murph, it's just not good enough yet.
I agree. And, you mentioned I keep always want to call him San Diego. You mentioned the Chargers game. When you got 2 pass rushers, just like we do, when you got Jones and Max on the corners, and in their case, you got, Bosa and the name that shall not be spoken that wears 52. When you got those 2 guys coming off the edges, like, you need a good right tackle. Like, it used to be, like, the old adage in the NFL was that, you had to have, a good quarterback. You have to have a franchise quarterback, and then you have to have somebody rush that franchise quarterback, and then you have to have somebody block for that franchise quarterback. So left tackle was the most important of the offensive linemen. Well, nowadays, when you have these dual pass rushers and you have these complicated defenses that coordinators are calling, where you're stacking linemen, you're doing all kinds of funky stuff, you got to have coverage, or you got to have protection on both ends. And I'm with you. It's a concern. And I'm rooting for Leatherwood. I have rooted for him for day one, and I'm not going to give up faith in him until he becomes a player for another team. As long as he's wearing a Raider uniform, he's got my support. I'm going to root for the Raiders that are, not the Raiders that aren't. You know what I mean? As I always say.
You're a better man than I. I'm like, there's still a string of thread holding me, because he's a talented young man. I felt he was getting beat so badly. And at times I felt he looked like he was just a beaten guy. You know what I mean? From an attitude perspective. And that's sad to see too. Like, I don't relish in that. I know some fans relish when a player struggles because they think he stinks and they want him gone. I don't do that. Right. But for me, it was that, but it wasn't just him. The entire offensive line was not great tonight, but the Raiders, because of the talent they had at quarterback and other positions, were able to overcome it. But I think they got to do something to address it. They have to bring in a signing or two to compete there, because you just got to get better. I don't think they can go to war. Like I said, I get scared to death for Raider fans and for the franchise with Derek Carr, with his new deal and where he's at the peak of his career, that you put him back there with a line that might not protect him well enough.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, our entire 2016 season evaporated when Trent Cole broke his leg, right? I think Donald Penn gave up 1 sack all year long, and that was the one. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's certainly a concern. And I don't want to be dismissive of the criticism of Alex Leatherwood. I guess I'm just trying to cling on to the idea that he's still young enough. Like, remember a Robert Gallery that came in and struggled at tackle and moved inside and was a pretty serviceable guard for the majority of his career. So, and if that's what ends up being Alex Leatherwood's story, yes, it's not the ideal one. It's not the one we want, but is that the one that we can maybe have out of it? At the end of the day, though, I think as of right now, it's got to be like Jermaine Illuminor or somebody like that has got to be your starting right tackle. Because you're right. Like, we can't, again, I bring up 2016. You think about what was the biggest week that we had, one of the best offensive lines this league has ever seen, except Austin Howard. Sorry, no disrespect, Austin Howard, but out of all those, all the sacks came from the right side that year, except for the one that Donald Penn gave up. So you can't just have a turnstile at that one position. So again, I'm not going to apologize for him, and the Raiders do need to address it. But here's the other thing I'll throw at you, Raider Nation, is that we know veterans don't like training camp. They just don't. Like, it beats their bodies up. And when you get into your, especially early 30s. I know that's in terms of life, that's very young, but in terms of football, that's kind of getting up there.
Yeah.
And so when you look at like a Nate Solder, and I brought his name up before, and I'm kind of banging that drum because he's the Patriot, and we've already seen the influx of Patriots and the Patriot quote way. We've seen an influx of the Titan way, even because Vrabel was a disciple of Belichick and has brought. So we've seen a lot of Titans players and Titans influence come over the team. Anyways, Nate Solder is a guy you could literally plug and play at right tackle week 1, and he'd be just fine. And so you're not going to beat him up during the preseason. You're going to reserve your cap space in case you have a major injury somewhere and you really need to address a big position. You know, maybe the Waller contract. Like I always say this to Raider fans, like they know. If you see it on TV, I promise you, they're the ones breaking down film. This is their job. They're getting paid millions of dollars, and they got an infinite amount of resources to invest in how to make this team better. I promise you, it's on their radar. So just because you haven't heard it publicly yet, or whoever didn't say it on Twitter, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. So I would say this, that it wouldn't surprise me one bit if we see somebody that's significant come in as a signing that's a plug and play tackle. It's just, again, because again, you look at the guys, what has he got? Like Solder, you got like Dwayne Brown, you got like Eric Fisher. All these guys are like 32, 33, 34 years old. Like they don't want to be in training camp. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw one before week 1.
No, and I just think the thing that concerns me, and again, I look at the success that these two men running this franchise on the football side have had, and I give them the benefit of the doubt. But I will tell you that with every week that's going by, I think the situation gets a little more concerning because if there was more improvement, like if they went out tonight, didn't play a great game, but improved and you saw improvement there, then I'm not so worried about a signing. I'm not worried about saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, okay, he had a couple tough plays, but he's progressed. Leatherwood's progressed or whatnot. But I do think, as we talked about this week, I do think, and you said tonight as well, Murf, you put a Luminor on that right side right now based on who you have, right? And then hopefully they do, to your point, and exactly what they need is a veteran to plug and play there. Doesn't have to be a guy who's going to be in the Pro Bowl. Doesn't have to be that. You just need a solid professional that's above average, that's going to be a consistent guy there, that's going to protect Derek Carr and make sure that this offense, which is going to be extremely high-powered, gets on the right track.
I couldn't agree with that more. 100%. I mean, that's got to be the way to go. And I think you're right. I think however they choose to address it, because I think it's, and if I'm reading what you're saying, they're too far into the process to coach this up. You know what I mean? And when you see regression is like you're talking about, like, you know, like that's not something you can work with as a coach. Like you got to see some sort of growth week to week. And here's the thing that's scary to me. And again, just my uneducated, untrained eye, when you see that player that's a first round pick playing longer and longer in the game and struggling just the same, regardless of the talent that he's going up against, that's got to make you nervous, because again, he's not going up against Bosa and Mac every down for 4 quarters. He's going up against a guy that's going to be, you know, bagging groceries in a few weeks. And I no disrespect to whoever that Dolphins lineman is, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's the truth. You know what I mean? And so like yes, it is concerning. I'm totally with you.
No, and I think that's where they just have to address it. I mean, look, we are now 3 weeks away from week 1. Okay. 21 days. I think it's 22 days, whatever it is. So you're going to have to think about this. If you're going to bring a guy in, especially, and you make a great point, Murph, these veterans don't want to go into camp. Okay. So if it's one of those guys, you got to get him into camp. You got to get the physical. You got to get him on the field. You got to start teaching him what the differences are. There's not going to be many because they know the system already, to your point. But at the same time, they got to get in shape, right, for that week 1. And so that's why, to me, there's some concern. Another disappointment, again, it's a guy I really like, and it just continues to look like the tea leaves are not going his way. It was Amik Robertson. Amik Robertson was out there again quite a bit and gave up some catches, including one on the sideline. There was for a long completion where he kind of seemed to let up on the play before the reception was made, and that's really bad. I really like the kid, but increasingly when I look at what's happening with that defensive backfield, I think he might end up being an odd man out, Murph.
Yeah, I think so too. It's certainly headed that way. And there's another guy, like just like with Abram, it was somebody we were rooting for big time. I loved from the get go. I believe it was at Louisiana Tech that he came out of.
Yep.
I love the series that the Raiders do on their website during the draft, where it's they get the call. And this young man was like, the tears were flowing, like the idea that he got drafted by an NFL team, got drafted by the Raiders. And if I remember his words right, he was like, "I'm going to give you my all, coach." And he was crying, just like that. If that don't win you over as a fan, like I don't know what to tell you. So you know what I mean? Like that idea. So he's just one of those guys from day one that we've absolutely rooted for, group of 5 school, the whole nine, and just for whatever reason, and I don't think it's a size thing, because I know that when he came in, he was a bit undersized.
Sure.
We know he's got dog in him, but it's just like what you're saying, like he's just not in the right spots on the field. Like it just seems like he's always just like a few steps out of the play. And and for whatever reason, I don't know what those coaching, tips are to get him in the right spot, but whatever they are, he's not there. And that sucks.
Yeah, and 3 different schemes in his 3 seasons too. Doesn't necessarily help. By the way, our good friend Violator is on. Says, "Hey Scott and Murf, love your analysis. What we're seeing on this team, it is definitely a chess game, and I agree that we go the way of both lines on offense and defense. Go Raiders!" Thanks, man. We appreciate you. Have one of your cigars for me tonight, my brother. I keep telling, I have never had a Violator cigar. He messages me and say, "Hey, just send me this here and I'll get you cigars." And I keep forgetting. So I got to do that. Sorry, man. Wayne, I will get it to you. I promise. But yeah, so Murph, so you look at that situation, him struggling there. But outside of that, I didn't find anybody else surprising that struggled tonight. Again, I thought as we started the show off, just to make sure people understand, I really believe mostly positive tonight. Again, the offensive line, we're going to focus on that because everybody's hyper focused on it going in. So when it doesn't go well, it's even worse because people are there ready to pounce, as I was too, frankly. I was watching it. But overall, you just like where this team is going. Just have to address some of those concerns before week 1. But overall, again, they came out of it with the exception of Jenkins. We don't have an injury report on him yet on how serious. It did not look good with that knee given out there on that play. But overall, when you get out that healthy with some of your other guys, that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Can I throw another couple positives out there that
please do.
Earlier when you asked me, and all I could come up with, my limited brain could only come up with Jasper freaking Horsted. But Zamir White punching it in first drive, that's one of the things that we saw him do for, ever, the whole time he was at Georgia. And although Josh Jacobs can be a strong runner, in the red zone and in short distance, that's really what Zamir White does. And I think probably, frankly, the reason that the Raiders don't pick up Jacobs' 5th-year option is that this could be the guy that could be that short distance guy. And so great performance by him early on, and really encouraged by what he's been able to do so far in this preseason. And I gotta continue to bang the drum for our special teamers, man. Our new version of Janikowski, Leckler, and John Kondo. Here comes AJ Cole, who's of course Trent Sigg snapping him the ball and Carlson kicking him through the uprights. But AJ Cole, he in his press conference this year early on said that one of the things he's working on is his directional ability. We know he's got a massive leg, but his directional ability and his ability to put people in places now with the ball, you don't have to be regular season to be able to do that. You know what I mean? You either do it or you don't when it comes to being able to kick. So he's doing a fantastic job. So shout out, AJ 6 there, man. That's been really encouraging to see that part of the game. And it's also nice too that special teams isn't the only thing we have to root for anymore.
No, that's true too. But I'll tell you, we talked a lot about it last week because the special team struggled. And I thought, and I almost forgot it, so thank you, Murph, for bringing it up. Overall, the special teams in general on coverage and keeping lane integrity, all of that stuff was really good tonight. So they had a bad couple outings where they let some long kicks go. Tonight, they were a spot on. Everybody played really well. The coverage was great. And that makes a difference because you really put Miami back in their zone, and it's just part of the game, and you need to be good at it, and they were good at it tonight. So that was huge. Okay, so now we talk through that, and I'm seeing the comments come through. John Simpson, yes, The offensive line just struggled, just period. That's the way it is. But when we look at the game again, I watch the game. I'll watch the game again tomorrow, and then we talk about this week. We'll get more into it. But towards the end of this game, Murf, because you can't just and I say this all the time. I don't know what it is. It's not the fans per se, but drama just follows Raider Nation, right? And it's not a big deal in the course of things, but it is a very interesting headline. So they have a UFC event tonight, and UFC is with the Gronks. They're trying to do like the whole Manning thing with Monday Night Football, but with UFC. So Dana White's on there, and you got the Gronks out in there, and Dana White starts telling the story that, hey, I had Brady and Gronk coming to Vegas in 2020. It was this close. It was right at the end. And then Gruden pulled the plug. Now, we don't know if this is all completely true, but Rob Gronkowski on the air tonight said, yes, it was true. That's how the story went. And does it matter now for the Raiders moving forward? It does not. But it's an interesting story because we heard all those rumors. And then, of course, everybody poo-pooed the rumors. And then, if you remember this offseason, Murph, I don't know if you saw this clip after that one. Tom Brady was on the barbershop show on HBO, and he said, hey, I was about to sign with this team right at the last minute. They changed their mind. And I said, you're sticking with that effing guy? You put them together, and suddenly you're like, wait. But a crazy story either way you look at it.
Yeah, this is why we can't have nice things. Like it's like you said, there's always something, man, with this freaking team. Yeah. It's like there's always some level of dysfunction, and usually it's almost cursed. It's always something that happened like years ago.
Right.
Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, why? Well, I don't want dysfunction now either. But like, the point being though is that like we can't just like it's like we're having the most encouraging offseason that we've had, and I don't know how long. Because other than the blip on the Raider fans, stick with me on this. Other than 2016. We haven't been good. I don't know if you've noticed, but like we've kind of sucked for the better part of 20 years, going all the way back to 2002 when we got our ass kicked by the freaking Buccaneers and John Gruden. And even if you remove the John Gruden years, it was 1983. I was 10 years old in January 22nd, 1984, when we won our third Super Bowl. So again, we haven't been good in all this time. So it's like now we were at this offseason in 2022. It's been one of the most encouraging things that we've had. We got this amazing front office. We got an amazingly functional organization. And then what happens? Drama. And so it's like, here's what I would say to you, Raider fan. Don't dwell, and it's a fair question to ask, Scott, and I'm totally with you. And it's a relevant ass story. But like Raider fan, don't get caught up in it, man. Just focus on the good stuff. Don't get caught up in this idea like, oh, what could have we have had? I don't know. Let's focus on the Raiders though that are, and not the Raiders that aren't. The Raiders that aren't are Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. Who knows what would have happened there? All I know is this though, and I will say this, Scott. The more we hear about Gruden post Gruden, the less encouraged how can I put it? The time that I gave him my unrelentless support during his coaching tenure, I feel like I want to pull some of that back a little bit because some of the decisions and some of the things that you've heard him make have been like, that was awful ego driven, or that was awful, I don't know, rigid or whatever. Like a lot of the things you hear about Gruden. So I'll say this and I'll shut up. I don't have any reason to not believe Dana White. He's one of the most honest, like in terms of like, runners of sports leagues. You can't get more brutally honest than Dana White. It's the timing is interesting. And I think it's probably just because of the whole Gronk thing, because like you said, he had him on the show. So I think that's why the timing of it came out when it did. But like Dana White, I have zero reason to not believe him. Like I distrust, I'll save the names, Gary Bettman, Roger Goodell, but like I distrust so many other people that aren't Dana White. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think it's true. I absolutely think it's true.
Well, and again, he has nothing to lose by talking about it or to gain by talking about it. And he had Gronk on the show, and Gronk said, you're right. That's the story. I mean, he verified it right on the air. So it's not like Dana White is lying. The timing, very interesting. But I agree with you on the Gruden piece though too. And the past is the past. You can't change it. All you can do is go forward, which is, why we spent the majority of this show talking about the positives moving forward, because it was a positive night and we got plenty of times to nitpick when things go wrong. But in this case, you're right. It goes back, and I go back to when right after Gruden got hired, and I was on the radio in Las Vegas on CBS Sports Radio there, and I did a show, and I've been very fortunate, and he's been very good to me. But Mike Lombardi has come on our show at least 2-3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year, to talk NFL. Right? It's a busy dude. He's got all kinds of things going on. But when Gruden came back, I had him on, and the fans that listen to my show, the listeners went crazy, calling him a Raider hater, because what he brought up was, look, John's a good coach. He's a great offensive line, but he's not a personnel guy, and that's what worries me. Can he run an organization? I don't think he can. So fans got mad, right? And I understood why. Everybody's really excited. But now Lombardi, whose son Nick is now the offensive coordinator of the Raiders, by the way. So I doubt he hates the Raiders. But it turns out a lot of that was true. And I think we all had those silver and black colored glasses because it was the era. It was the last era the Raiders were good. And he's such a great personality. So I don't fault anybody for, if you want to call it, falling for that or just being disappointed how it turned out. But clearly that story is going to live on here for a few days. And I just thought it was fascinating. And then the other side of it was Brady being on HBO. Was he talking about Derek Carr there? It's like, really? That he called him that guy? It's like, that's weird, because it's not like Derek Carr is a bad quarterback. If he was a marginal quarterback, okay, I understand that, but that wasn't the case. So just a really interesting undercurrent. But this team, this organization, these guys are just different. And so that's why I keep challenging the fans out there, Murf. Let go of the negative. And I know this story pops up and it brings up some of that, but don't. Just look at it as a story. It's like, oh, well, okay, yeah, we could have had them, but we still wouldn't have a defense. We still wouldn't have had an offensive line. So who knows what would have happened to them?
Absolutely. And Scott, I'll say this, and this is where the fan can come out in me.
Yes.
All right. So here's what I would encourage you to focus on instead, Raider Nation. Focus on the beauty. I'm going to paint a scenario for you. Derek Carr is on the podium, and I don't even know who has the Super Bowl this year, but whoever's doing the broadcast hands him that Lombardi trophy, and we've just beat the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. How many demons do we exercise by beating the Buccaneers and Tom Brady? Can you imagine the poetry that goes on there? They will be literally like, and I was alive for the 76 Super Bowl when they finally, beat the Steelers in the AFC Championship to win their first championship. So I don't want to demean any other Super Bowls the Raiders have won, but I'll say this. That could be the most, if not one of the most significant moments in Raiders history. So let's root for that. Let's focus on that. Let's go kick everybody's ass that's in our way for that freaking 4th Lombardi trophy.
Absolutely. No, I think that, but that's the point is this story, you could get negative about it, but I don't think it's anything. I just think it's interesting, right? Our good friend Kevin, who listens to our show and tweets back and forth at me, he's like, who cares? It's like, well, people do care because it's an interesting story. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't take away from Derek Carr being the starting quarterback. It doesn't take away from how this team is starting to progress through this season, heading to the regular season. But it is interesting. And to your point earlier, Murph, it's just amazing how this stuff finds the Raiders. It does. Even things went so nicely this offseason, right? It was just all pretty much good news. And then suddenly, these little things start popping up. And this one, of course, has to bring more attention to that. And then, of course, the people who hate Derek Carr, which is, I know, a strong word, but there are people who do. I don't know how you hate somebody you've never met just because of the way they play football. But nonetheless, they're going to love it, right? Because see, I told you. Yeah. I told you. And it's like, well, yeah, you might have told and you might have been somewhat right about a certain thing, about a rumor. But at the end of the day, look what's happened, right? Mark Davis had the opportunity to bring in a coach and to commit to a quarterback, and he committed to Derek Carr.
So do you think, Scott, is there, so we know Derek says that he blocks out what goes on the outside.
Yeah.
But I think there's a part of Derek where this kind of stuff gets to him. And it's okay. This isn't a criticism of Derek Carr. He's a human being and he hears the things and all that. And as much as you want your quarterbacks or your players, period, to compartmentalize, there is a really, there's a sensitive heart there. You're going to receive these things. does this motivate Derek? Like, what Derek are we going to get out of this? Are we going to get pissed off Derek out of something like this? Or is this even on his radar at all? And this is only a fan thing?
It's a good question, because what I've always said with Derek has been that he always says, yeah, I don't listen to that stuff. But then he comments a lot. And of course, he got into the argument with the reporter earlier this year as well about that. So clearly he listens. And that's okay too. I've also defended him when he's blocked people on Twitter to say, because, there's being negative. Well, that's fine. Why do we, who needs more negative in their life? Not me.
Yeah,
I'm not going to raise my hand and say, yeah, come at me. Why? So you're just easier to write them out. But it'll be interesting to see that, because it is now somewhat verified. I don't know if anybody in the Las Vegas press pool will ask him about it, and whether it would be a good question or not. If I was going to do it and I was a reporter, I'd kind of do it on the side. I wouldn't do it in a press conference and just say, hey man, what do you think of this stuff? I'm just interested. And yeah, it's on the record, or if you don't want to be on the record, fine, tell me off the record, and then I can't talk about it. But, oh well. So, I mean, again, it is what it is. This Raiders team is moving forward. They got so much going in the positive direction, but it's a good question, Murph. I don't know how it will impact him. He'll probably chuckle at it, knowing, especially since it was a Gruden thing and he's gone, that maybe he can just say, oh, okay, well, there's another thing I didn't suspect, but it kind of reinforces maybe what he thinks now of his former coach.
I hope it, and I agree. And I hope here's what my guess would be. And I clearly don't know the man, only know him via press conference and watching him on TV and whatnot. And I mentioned a sensitive heart. He's a kind guy. That's so when you're kind, you have compassion, and
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like you're going to have, okay. I think he can be dismissive of this idea that he's the MRFer that Tom Brady was talking about, but it registers. And ultimately that's what you want, right? You want that to register. Because you want to have something to prove. I don't think there's anything wrong with a player having a chip on their shoulder, and you can manufacture chips. Like you can talk yourself into being, the underdog, or you can really be the underdog. And in this case, Derek's the underdog. There was an article that came out in PFF this week where they had the most projected passing yards in the NFL. Derek Carr didn't even make the list. He was behind Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know where Derek Carr would have been on the list, because he certainly wasn't in the top 10. But when you look at the players that are in the top 10, how come Derek threw for 4,800 yards last year? He's this close to throwing for 5,000. And oh yeah, we picked up this guy from Fresno State named Devontae Adams, his best friend, who's the best wide receiver in the football. Are you freaking kidding me? They're like, Derek, talk about disrespect. And those are the kind of things that I, as a fan, I love that stuff.
Absolutely.
Talk smack about us. What do we do as Raider fans? We're rebellious. What is the whole point of Al Davis and the mystique? Is it it's us versus the world, man? And so I hope things whether it's this story or the PFF thing or all the criticism that can be out there for Derek Carr, I hope that registers in a way with him. And he's such a positive guy. I think he spins that in a great way and uses that. And if you want to talk about Tom Brady, he's the ultimate of that. He's the GOAT of that, of being able to take things that are said about him and utilizing them to motivate him to go on and do great things. And I'm going to trust that that's what Derek is going to do with these comments and all this freaking BS that's going on this offseason, man. I'm looking, again, I got a fan crazy ass brain, but I'm thinking that Derek is way over 5,000 yards this year. And I think he's going to be in the running for the MVP. If he's not, I'll say this, he's not the guy. If this isn't the year we put it together, he puts it together, the Raiders put it together, then I'll just casually watch through the rest of however long and remove any expectations of this team ever again.
Oh, that's so funny. I love it. By the way, Moe has jumped in because I guess Moe is working Bleacher Report stuff tonight. He's covering the entire league tonight. That's why he can't be with us. But he did jump in to say Michael Jordan did this. Use any slight against you to motivate you. Players get upset about the top 100 players. Absolutely. That is so true. And Moe, thanks for stopping in. As you can see, Murf is doing a great job filling in for you. And he has
borrowed the seat. I'm keeping it warm for you, Moe.
And he's got better taste in food. But nonetheless, but yeah, no, the Jordan thing is a perfect example. And I think Derek does that. I think he does it from the perspective of, from a nice guy perspective versus being more of a cocky type of guy. And some guys are that way too. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just how you do it. So we'll see how he does that. And again, to your point about putting it on, there's really no excuses, even though we spent some time tonight talking about my big concerns with the offensive line, then that's the only thing that worries me. But that's not an excuse. To me, that's just, you're going to have to work around it, right? You have enough other weapons and enough other things going on that you'll have to do your best to try to do that. So I agree with you on that, Murph. It's going to be fascinating a fascinating season. And as we move forward, it'll be fun to see how it all unwinds. Murph, go ahead, buddy.
I was going to say, let's make one last point.
Yeah.
This something that came up on our show this last week. When the Bengals were on the clock during the COVID draft, they all the experts told you they needed to draft an offensive lineman. And what did they do? They drafted Jamar Chase. They drafted a good friend of Joe Burrow, somebody that he had chemistry with. It lended to an explosive offense, and they were in the Super Bowl. Think about that when you apply Devontae Adams and his equation to the Raiders, Raider Nation. I would just tell you that sometimes in the way that the league is formed now, there are ways to overcome weaknesses with a high-powered offense. And if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase can get it done, I have all the faith in the world that Derek, and I'm not going to tell you they're going to be in the Super Bowl this year, whatever. I will think that because I'm a Raider fan, but I don't see how you can not find ultimate success in some form because you got those two guys now on your team.
Absolutely. And it's a great example using the Bengals because it's a similar situation. I mean, it's apples to apples. And they were able to do it. And you're right. People in Cincinnati hated that pick at very first. And then, of course, when they saw him playing, they fell in love with it. But it certainly was something that you could compare. And I appreciate that as well. But, that's why we said, I saw somebody comment, hey, give us positives. We spent the whole majority of the show. You're coming in at the end here. So rewatch it. You'll see all the positives because that's where we did spend some time on breaking down this game. Murph, as always, man, it is a pleasure. I know we'll have you on. Next game is on Friday. It's a Friday night game. This damn preseason, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, makes weekend plans a little tough.
I'll be there.
Nonetheless, you will be there. You're going to be there.
Oh, yeah, I'll be there. So I'll be doing my call in from freaking Allegiant Stadium if that's okay.
Nice. Yeah, we'll get you on your phone. They have good Wi-Fi there.
Okay.
We'll get you in the stands. That'll even be better. You talk about voice of the fan. It'll be voice of the fans. You have all your guys around. It'll be great.
Oh, it'd be cool, man. Sitting down there in section 132, right down there behind a bench, man. We'll throw it up on the phone there. And
that'll be awesome.
Hopefully everything will come through okay and we'll be able to chat then. Yeah.
Absolutely. Remember, follow Murph @_Murph and follow Raiders Fan Radio and go check out his YouTube channel. Great show. And you can see the fan cave there behind him, which I'm always envious of because it's amazing. It's the best. It is. There's a lot of great Raider content out there and content creators, YouTubers, you name it. But no one touches the fan cave. It's just, no one does. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the show, Murph. It just is. The care, the love, all of the eras are representative. It's fantastic.
You're too kind, my friend. You're too kind. And one of these days, we'll have to get you in the fan cave.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have a frosty adult beverage and talk to Raider Nation a little bit.
Oh, that'd be fun. That would be fun. All right, man. Well, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right, you too. All right, so that's going to conclude this post-game show, if I can spit it out, post-game show here as the Raiders beat the Dolphins 15-13. A couple reminders I want to make sure you subscribe to the show. Make sure that you also hit the notifications button here on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio of this, which was released tonight as well, make sure you subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you would. We'd appreciate that and do that. We will be back this week. We usually do shows Tuesday, Thursday, but Mo calls me yesterday. He's like, hey, we got cuts again. Let's make sure we do it Tuesday. So we're going to switch days this week and go Wednesday. But we probably drop something earlier than that with a mailbag or something coming up. So stay tuned. That's why you need to subscribe. You'll get everything pushed right to you. But what we will do is we'll be back with you Wednesday for our full regular show where we talk about the Raiders' next 5 cuts and any other cuts around the league that could be opportunities for the Raiders to get better, particularly on offensive line. And also Mo will be back as well. Again, he was gone tonight. He's working all the NFL games tonight, so he was swamped over at Bleacher Report. But you can follow him on Twitter as well at MoeMoton. And also, I am at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. We'd appreciate a follow there as well. For everybody here at Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast, we thank you guys for being with us. We appreciate you, Raider Nation, sharing your thoughts and being with us after tonight's game. Until next time.